As the host of Neutralize the Mama Trauma podcast, I am delighted to be able to bring you this podcast. My name is Wendy Lopez, and I would like to introduce myself to you. I specialize in helping people overcome their emotional blocks through different techniques, through emotional empowerment coaching and compassionate healing life facilitation. As a mom who has experienced narcissistic trauma, I help moms eradicate self doubt in order to regain self confidence to elevate their status both at home and at work. In our podcast, we discuss people's struggles, triumphs, and failures. We dive deeper into self love, self compassion, self acceptance, and mindful, holistic tips. In every episode, I hope that you can take a golden nugget of advice and apply it to the journey of motherhood in order to raise your level of awareness. Welcome to Neutralize the Mama Trauma podcast, where you find healing and creative mental thought advice from experts on past pain and narcissistic experiences and trauma. Today, we are honored to guest on our podcast, Chenelle Ellie. Chenelle Ellie is a licensed therapist. She is passionate about helping women gain more self-confidence by tackling anxious and depressive thoughts and teaching her clients the benefits of setting appropriate boundaries. She also enjoys providing helpful tips on how to find the best therapist for you and discussing benefits of therapy in general. If you'd like to check out more about Chenelle, I'll go ahead and list her website and social media pages and her podcast, which she has, Podcast Conversations with Your Therapist. You'll be able to find that all in the details. So excited to have you here, Chenelle. I'm so excited to share your expertise on how, first of all, you got where you are today. So can you share with us your story about your struggle or what you experienced? Because I know we were talking about difficulties with your mom, because this is something that I do want you to make sure you do touch on, is the difficulties with your mom, wishing that she was the type of mother, the idea that you had in your head, how a mother should be, and what the reality was for you that she was not.
Absolutely. I'm so excited to be here. So, my kind of story is my mom was a single mom. She was married to my dad for maybe 3 years. And so, for the majority of my life, I don't know my parents together, I know them apart. So,
Mhm.
she was a single mom. And I always kind of felt like she didn't like me very much. I knew she loved me. I
Mhm.
always had all the things that I needed. If I was to ask for any type of materialistic thing, she would always go above and beyond to make sure that she would give it to me. So it wasn't like she was awful or abusive or neglectful. It was just that I never really felt understood. I never really felt
Mhm.
like she wanted to spend time with me or she liked the person that I am. I
Mhm.
remember her saying a lot of times, even as an adult, she'll say things like, I'm not very nice, or the things that I'm saying isn't nice, and things like that. And, parents say that. I say it
Mhm.
to my
Mhm.
daughter sometimes, like, that wasn't
Mhm.
very nice. But the difference is, I felt like I was being told that I wasn't nice when I was voicing my opinions and my experiences, and
Mm.
anything that was negative was taken as I'm not a good person. So little Chanel was just constantly thinking that I was just this angry, mean person. When in reality, when I look back on it, because hindsight is 2020, but when I
Mm.
look back on it, it's just the things that I was saying was making the adults in the room uncomfortable. Rightfully so, but that's not my
Mhm.
fault. So,
Mhm.
if I was to say like, "Oh, I don't wanna wear all these hand-me-downs from this person," I remember this, to make a very long story short, somebody gave us like this doll from somebody who had passed away, and they said it looked
Mhm.
just like the person. They're like, "Oh, and I want Chanel to have it." And I was just like, "No, I don't want this." But things like that
Mhm.
were I felt like were forced on me. Like I didn't have a choice. So I was petrified, and
Mhm.
we still laugh about it today. I was petrified for about 6 months of this doll that I thought was going to come to
Right.
life. So when people, and It's funny now, but I'm like, it was
Right?
awful.
We can laugh now, but poor little
Yes,
Chanel,
yes,
no.
I know, little Chanel, it was not funny, but it was just like things like that where I'm just like, I don't want this doll. Like, why do I have to have these things? Why do I have to do this? And then I was told that I was mean, and I don't
Mm.
think that they said ungrateful, but I think I was made to feel like I was ungrateful for not, taking anything that anybody would give me and stuff like that. So I I just struggle so hard, and I think a lot of the clients that I see today struggle as well, because if you don't have a mom that's just like overtly abusive, then
Mhm.
people tend to think that you're just over exaggerating, or um
Oh, right.
it's
That's a
not that
good
bad, or like,
point.
what are you talking about? But it's really important as a child, to feel understood and to feel like your words mean something and you are of
Mhm.
value, and your
Mhm.
parents want to spend time with you, and stuff like that. And I just didn't have that. Um, and I think in recent years, my mom has shared with me that she's struggled with depression for the majority of her
Mm.
life. So
Mhm.
I I I understand a little bit more, especially being a mom now. I get it,
Mhm.
because kids are
Mhm.
hard. Being a
Mhm.
mom is the hardest thing I've ever done in the history of life. It is so hard. So I get it. I can empathize that, I was probably triggering her and all the things that I was going through, because moms are just people. We're just people, and we're trying to do our best to, be the just emotionally stable for these little, especially when they're little, these little kids who are not emotionally stable. Like, they're flipping out
Right.
about all types of
Right.
stuff, and you're supposed to
Right.
be the one who's just like supposed to be just solid and supportive, and sometimes that's hard when you're going through different things. So I can
Mhm.
empathize, but at the same
Mhm.
time, I just needed something different than what she could give me. So it took a long
Mhm.
time to grieve the mother that I wanted her to be. um
And I love that you're really stating that grieving the mother that you wanted her to be.
mhm.
That's deep.
Yeah.
That is really deep. And I wanted to land with the audience about grieving the mother that you wished, or even the father you wished you had,
Mhm.
right? Because I believe that we hold these as children, the thought of the idea that
Yes.
the mom and dad should be loving, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
Mom and dad should be nurturing.
Yeah.
Mom and dad should be supportive, and almost like your cheerleader.
Mhm.
And here you experienced, and I'm sure as many, the opposite of, and then there's grief.
Yeah.
So can you go in a little bit more about what does that grief feel like for you? Like, how do
Yeah.
you know like it's grief? Because grief, I'm glad that we're talking about this, because a lot of people associate grief like an actual physical loss.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
here your parents are alive,
Mhm.
and alive, you're grieving the parent you don't have,
Yeah. I'm so glad you asked
right?
that, because there's so many different types of grieving too, where I feel like you can grieve a relationship, whether it's a breakup, or a divorce. You can grieve that relationship, because it's a grieving is just losing something. It's not there.
Mhm.
And when you're losing the idea of a parent, you've had this idea in your head of like, this is what it should be. This is what I want. And it takes a minute to grieve the fact that you will never get that. It's gone.
Mhm.
It probably was never there. It was just a figment of your imagination. It will never be here. And what do I do with that moving forward? So it's all different types of grieving, where I work with clients on grieving the loss of a relationship. If there's like a breakup, or a friend is no
Mhm.
longer friends with you or something like that, the idea of a person, the idea of what you wanted that person to be. I know that a lot of parents grieve the idea of what they want their children to be, where you're just constantly building up these
Right. That's
ideas of these
another
little
good one.
children.
That's
Yeah. And then
right.
they just grow up like, no, I don't want to be an astronaut. I want to be a influencer. And they're like, what? No. No. That's not even in my that's not what I want. So you really have to grieve these ideas that you have in your head, and just accepting that it's not
Right.
gonna come. It's little
Right.
little Johnny's not gonna be an astronaut. He's not going to school for it. It's just not gonna happen.
It's not gonna happen.
No.
Or right? Or they say, I want to be a YouTuber. And they're
Yeah.
like, what?
Yeah.
What are you
No.
talking
Yeah.
about?
That's
So
crazy.
how did you realize about this grief, this living, it's a living grief. How did
Mhm.
you like work with it, cope with it? How do you get to the other side of realizing, like you said, it's like the idea or the imagination of it?
Mhm.
How do you get to the other side?
So I feel like I'm very privileged just because I am a therapist. So I
Hmm.
have access to a lot more of like trainings and education and stuff like that. Other people can
Hmm.
too, but it's just kind of in the forefront of my mind because this is what I do. I
Hmm.
eat, sleep, and breathe it. So of course, with all the education that I've read up on and trainings that I've
Hmm.
held and books that I've read and stuff like that. But I think um I'm gonna be honest, I think it was in recent years where I finally
Hmm.
realized like I need to grieve the person that I wanted her to be because I was in therapy and the person and my therapist at the time was just like, but what if she can't do that? It sounds like you've tried everything and she's not playing ball. Like it's not happening.
Hmm.
What makes you
Right.
so and you keep having these and I think this is the main thing is that and I see it in a lot of my clients too, where you keep having these conversations where you're pouring your heart out and you're saying, like, you're hurting me. Please stop. I want this. I want that.
Hmm.
Like,
Hmm.
don't you understand? You're hurting my feelings and da da da. And they can't change. They can't for whatever reason. I don't think that my mom is personally someone who's just not a nice person and abusive or anything like that, or even I wouldn't
Hmm.
categorize her in that way. So there's so
Hmm.
many different reasons why they might not be able to give you what they can give you, but
Hmm.
you just have to kind of realize like you're just sitting here beating a dead horse. You're trying to have all these conversations, you're opening up yourself, and then
Yes.
you're just disappointed. So why are you doing it? You got to
Right.
stop and just accept what you got in like in your life, and and you can still you have the right to be sad about it and angry, of course, like you have the right to your feelings about it, but how are you going to start protecting yourself? So how I started protecting myself is setting boundaries, is to just I won't say that I've closed myself off. I still talk to her. She knows pretty much everything about me. It's just I'm not expecting her to I'm not doing it with the
Mm.
expectation that she's going to magically become a different person. I'm just doing it
Right. Oh my
when the
gosh.
feelings when it feels right. I open up myself and it's for me or for whatever the reason is that I said whatever I said, but I'm not doing it to get her to see the light.
Oh, yes. And I think from a child, right? The desire of having that magical mom.
Mhm.
And it's completely opposite of what your experience and your reality when you were younger.
Yeah.
When did you make the choice to one, not be like her?
Mhm.
And two, because we tend to emulate our environment.
Mhm.
And two, when did you make the choice of moving beyond that and actually becoming who you are today?
I feel like, and this is kind of hard to say, but I feel like I've spent my whole life trying not to be like her. So that's kind
Mhm.
of been my motivation of how to become the person that I am. And I'm still working on, like, I'm not a perfect person, but I could tell that she was just sad and I don't want to be sad. So just,
Mhm.
that was my motivation. But I think what really got me to change is becoming a mom because I've, I've always felt like I was her mom. And I think
Mm.
when I was pregnant and some of the situations that we were struggling with when I was pregnant, I don't know if I said it to her or I said it to my husband, but I was just like, I can't be her mother anymore. I have an actual baby growing inside of me that
Oh.
needs me. And she's an adult. so she can do whatever she wants to do. It's not my responsibility. I love her. I can be there for her. We can still have a relationship, but I'm not her mom. I have to be a mom to this little person. And then as my daughter and now my son, as they get older and older and it gets harder and harder just being a mom in general, it's I don't have the energy. I can't do it because I have to do what's best for them and what's best for me. And what's best for them is to have the most
Mm,
healthiest mother possible. So I have to prioritize
right.
myself in that way.
So what a beautiful light, of your child, your firstborn, to come and teach you about boundary,
Yeah.
right?
I didn't
What
think
a
about it that way,
gift.
but yes.
Yeah, that's exactly what I saw. I saw your child still in the womb
Mhm.
came to teach you boundary for yourself.
Yeah.
Because if you didn't have the baby, you would still keep repeating that cycle,
Yes.
right? And it's
Yes.
like you assumed that parentalness,
Mhm.
right? And so that is so draining
I know. I
because you're still
know.
trying, and you're married. So you're still,
Mhm.
you're doing you. And then
Mhm.
you have your marriage.
Mhm.
And then on top of that, you still feel responsible for the parent because you didn't have the parent. You realize
Yes.
somewhere along the line that she wasn't a parent. So you innately took over.
Yeah. And I do it with
Wow.
everyone. I did it with my husband in the early years of our marriage. I do it with my friends where I'm just like this protective person of the people that I care about because that's my role. That's what I'm supposed to do.
Right. And this is why it's so important for me to do this podcast because just like was it a girl or a boy, your firstborn?
A girl, my
Okay. So
daughter. Hmm.
as she came in the world in your womb, she was the first one that taught you about how important boundary needed to be for
Yeah.
you between you and your mom, right? And
Hmm.
what a beautiful thing that it was a female
Yeah.
baby to a
That's
female because it's
true.
already breaking kind of like the generation
Hmm. Hmm.
where she's not going to have to deal with that because of her helping you feel this that you need to set this boundary. You've
Hmm.
also helped between the two of you to set and break this cycle,
Yeah. Absolutely.
right? Yes. And so this is why it's important for me for the podcast so moms can realize like when we in your case it was your child, in my
Hmm.
case it was my child too that helped
Hmm.
me set some boundaries for myself with work and when I was pregnant of him. But so moms can realize that there can be, even though you've been through whatever, trauma you've been through, but that you can learn and overcome the trauma and become a better version for
Hmm.
yourself, for one. If you're in a partnership, that helps greatly. And then the kids benefit because the kids become more loved and the mom is more supportive.
Yes. Yes.
Right,
Absolutely.
right. Now you wrote an article on Brains Magazine, and I feel it's so, I was very touched by reading this, and with the conversation that we're having right now on the podcast, it leads into beautifully what I wanted when I told you before the podcast. I wanted to touch on this on
Hmm.
5 toxic family roles and their consequences. And as
Hmm.
we're speaking, I see how you took on the parental role,
Hmm. I
which
think I
was
took on a few
ultimately
roles, but yes.
right. Yeah, yeah. But that itself was toxic for you.
Hmm.
So can you talk about this article that you wrote on Brains Magazine?
Sure. So I think with a lot of therapists, but me personally, when I'm working with clients, I find it very, very important to talk about their childhood experiences. So I
Hmm.
feel like a lot of people feel like when you go to therapy, it's usually because there's trauma. You're going because your marriage is in crisis mode and you have to fix it. Like it's just this big thing. And sometimes it is, and sometimes it's not.
Hmm.
And even though there might be some big crisis that you're dealing with or this big trauma, it's a lot of times it stems from what happened throughout childhood because childhood is where our brains developed and it's developing through all of the experiences that we're having.
Mhm.
Genetics do play a role too, but it's just, how you interact with your family, your friends, all the good stuff. So I thought it was just really important to talk about these family roles. And I
Mhm.
also, I don't know if you're familiar with the movie Encanto, but I feel like
Mhm.
Encanto, it just exhibits this whole article too. Because they're,
Oh yes,
yeah,
yes,
because the
I love
scapegoat
that
is,
movie too.
yeah, this, I feel like the
Yeah.
scapegoat is Bruno, definitely hands
Mhm.
down. But like, yeah, so the scapegoat is usually the person who everybody pushes all the problems off to. So
Mhm.
it's usually the person who is calling people on their BS, who is speaking the truth about what's going on, and everybody in the family is just in a state of denial, or there is so much trauma and dysfunction there that they aren't able to see the truth. So the truth could be that, a parent is abusive or manipulative, or there's some substance abuse or something like that.
Okay.
And if the scapegoat says something like, I think mom has a problem, everybody is going to start yelling at the scapegoat and be like, no, there's nothing wrong with her. What is wrong with you? Stop saying these things about our mother, da 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 da, because they don't want to hear the truth. So
Oh.
usually, and then it becomes a habit where if the scapegoat does anything, then it's automatically bad. So um, the house stinks, it must be the scapegoat. We are out of money, it's probably because the scapegoat went to Arby's that one day. It's your fault. Everything is your fault.
Oh,
And those are
interesting.
light examples, but it really does
Mhm.
happen where I'll talk to clients and they're just like, I can't do anything right. And it's just you form these habits and relationships where the person just plays this role and you can't see them outside of that role.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's the
Holy
scapegoat.
goodness. Okay.
Yeah. And then I felt like I was a little bit of the scapegoat too,
Mhm.
because I was the
Mhm.
person who was saying the things that were triggering a lot of people, and a lot of people didn't want to. And it's not because I don't think my whole family was in denial or anything, but I don't think they were ready to talk about the things that I was saying in my little
Hmm. That's
voice.
pretty
So,
deep.
yeah,
Yes. Right.
yeah.
And the scapegoat then has psychological abuse,
Mhm.
right? For
Mhm.
being blamed for things that it for speaking the truth, they're being blamed that it's their fault.
Yes. Or you're making things up and you're being dramatic, or that kind of stuff.
Oh, okay,
Yeah, it can
okay,
be
okay.
anything, any reason that they put on you, but
So
I
it's like a
mean,
label that they put on
yeah.
them.
Yeah, and children should be
Oh,
made to just try to understand their experiences, because even though I felt like no one understood me, that's important. It doesn't matter that
mhm,
I'm not saying that you were an awful parent, or I don't think you heard me say that at all about my mom. I still don't think that she was an awful parent, but I
mhm.
did not feel understood. And if my
Right,
child told me that I just don't feel like you understood me or understand me, it would crush me. And then
right,
it would make me want to be like, why? What am I doing so I can fix it?
right,
But I didn't
right.
get that. And it's,
Mm,
yeah. So it doesn't matter what they're doing or
interesting.
what their intentions are. It matters about how I felt about it.
Mhm, mhm. Okay, and then the other one?
So the people pleaser. So I see these a lot in therapy
Mhm,
too. So the
mhm,
people pleaser is the person who kind of sees everything that's going on in their surroundings, and they learn that in order to feel safe emotionally or sometimes physically, that they need to make the other people like them. So
mhm,
these are the people who are constantly giving people affirmations and being really really nice, or
mm,
just people pleasing, just doing whatever the other people want them to do
mm,
so that they aren't hurting them, whether it's
mm,
emotionally, whether it's physically. They
mhm.
just don't they've learned that that's how you should move around life. And then that's when you become an adult, it's it's not beneficial, because then people walk all over you.
Right, right, right.
You're not standing
Okay,
up for yourself. So that's the
okay.
people pleaser. the caretaker is the person who just takes care of everybody else. So that doesn't necessarily mean financially. That could be, or just like in a nurturing sense for a baby or a child. It could just
Hmm.
be constantly cooking or cleaning for your loved ones. You
Hmm.
just think that it's your job to take care of everybody around you. And I
Hmm.
think what happens with moms is you're doing this your whole life, and then you have a little baby, and you got to take care of this baby. And then let's say you don't have enough time for your husband or your partner or your friends. You're just like, I'm just a horrible wife. I'm a horrible sister because I'm not doing all of these things for them like I used to. But it's not, you're not supposed to be everybody's caretaker. It's like it's okay for other people to
Hmm.
take care of you. It's okay for your relationships to evolve so that you're not constantly taking care of everybody.
It's so true. And I want to add to that because I find moms are the hardest people to help.
Mhm. Mhm.
Like it amazes me how we are not wired to receive,
Yeah.
but we give away,
Mhm.
right? And
Yeah.
this is what we need to learn, that it's a balance. Like you need
Mhm.
to receive and you don't need to take care of the whole world, but you need to
Yes.
most importantly take care of yourself,
Yes.
right?
Absolutely. And it's interesting because I haven't actually looked it up in the dictionary, but I think in the dictionary for the word for the definition for mother is something like to mother or to nurture, and that's it. Like there's not a
Oh.
real definition of what a mother is supposed to be. So society has created this like Mother Teresa type image of this woman who just gives herself to her children and is able to do all the things, and she's super mom, and that is what, that is the mecca, this is the standard of what mothers should be. And when we don't feel like we meet that standard, it's just we feel a lot of shame. And I don't think that we see a lot of people in media or in our families where moms are getting a lot of support. It's usually us
Yes,
that's
yes,
supporting everybody else.
absolutely. I took a certification called Integrated Behavioral Health. It's where
Mhm.
holistic and conventional meet. And I
Okay.
absolutely apply that in my own practice. And what happens is moms tend to, veer help away,
Mhm.
right? They don't receive. And the research that was made, and when I had a test for this certification, it showed through research that 80% of women are on anxiety and depression medication.
Yeah. Which is like the quick fix. So they can just
It
continue to
just,
give.
yes. So
Yeah.
it's so important that moms understand the balance. And like you said, the dictionary has that definition, and it's like,
Mhm.
yeah, no, you're not supposed to nurture and mother the whole world.
No.
Yeah, no
And I
wonder we're on
remember,
medications.
yes,
The
and I
heck?
remember those times when, especially becoming a new mom, because I'm telling you, I had
Mm,
no experience with children. I have no siblings. I don't have any like first cousins that are uh, near me at all. Like it was just me as a child. So I don't have a lot of experience with kids. I also was the first in all of my friend groups to have a child. So I
mm,
did have this idea of like it's supposed to come naturally and easy, and it was not
mm.
for me.
Not, no.
And I just
Hmm.
felt so much
Absolutely not.
shame. And I remember looking at everybody on Facebook, and my sister-in-laws are just like, I see them as like, they are so like, it just comes so naturally for them when we're around. And I'm just like, they got two or three kids, and I'm just sitting here with this one baby, and I barely breastfeed her. Like, I barely have the milk. And my sister-in-law is like pumping it out like a cow. Like, what is wrong
Like
with
gallons of
me?
boob.
Yeah. It's like I'm not doing this right. This is awful. But I
My
mean, we just
body's
have
not
to.
functioning.
Yes, I was like, this is not like I'm just not meant to do this. Like, what is wrong with me?
Oh, yeah. Oh my
Yeah, it's so
goodness.
hard.
Feels
But
horrible.
yes, and I'm like pushing people away. People want to come over and like hold the baby while I shower. I'm like, no, because I don't want you to come in this house with it looking like this. Second baby, I was like, everybody come over, bring me food. Like, you just gonna have to smell me until I go take a shower. Like, I didn't care,
Right.
second baby. But first baby, I was like, no, like, leave me alone. I didn't want nobody to see me crying. It was just a hot mess.
Right. Oh
Yeah.
my gosh. This is so
Yeah.
wonderful because this is the truth. Right.
And then the other one is the family members who's too sensitive. So too sensitive. What I hear some of my clients say is that people say they're too sensitive, they're doing too much, they're dramatic. That kind of stuff is the family member that usually comes to therapy because they're made to feel like their experiences are not real. And that
Hmm.
is a very dangerous thing. So if a
Hmm.
child is crying, for example, because their grandmother passed away, and it's a boy, and the father comes in and says, "Stop all that crying." You're not validating his experience. Of course he's sad. He just lost his grandmother. So then
Mm.
they create whatever idea they have around crying or showing emotion. It's so important to validate people's experiences. So just because you wouldn't become angry about that one thing doesn't mean that that person is too sensitive or too angry or mean or whatever it is,
Interesting.
to whatever it
Oh my
is.
goodness. And that,
Yeah.
travels to generation. Like you said it perfectly, validating the experience, but then yet someone comes and says, "Oh, don't, that's that saying, don't cry over spilled milk."
Mhm.
Like the
Mhm.
people take that seriously and everything. Like, don't cry over that. Like you shouldn't be crying over that. But it
Yeah.
really meant something to that person. I really feel because I fall in that category. I used to fall in that category, the
Mhm.
member who is too sensitive, right? But
Mhm.
in the sensitivity, there's a super strength to that because
Yes.
that person can really feel,
Mhm.
right? So
Mhm.
they value their feelings, but someone that's coming in and dismissing them,
Yes.
they somehow learn to cut out those feelings,
Yes. And then in
right?
return, when they become adults and they're in romantic relationships or relationships with friends, and somebody does something to them, they don't want to voice it because they feel like, oh, I'm probably being too sensitive. Let me just ignore it. But you're
Mm.
still hurting. And then
Hmm.
most of the time, 9 times out of 10, like when I'm talking to my clients, they have every right to be angry or sad or disappointed, but they're so used to saying like, "Oh no, I'm just too sensitive. Let me just get over it." When and they're not tackling the actual issue.
Mm.
And I will never understand why people can't just agree to disagree about your feelings and your experiences because both can be true, right? Like with the example of my mom, I felt misunderstood, but I also realized that she did the best that she could with the tools that she had.
Hmm.
Both can be true. So I'm not
Hmm.
saying that you're an awful
Got
mother.
you.
I'm
Yes.
saying
Hmm.
I didn't feel understood. I didn't feel the nurturing that I really, really wanted. And that is important. It doesn't make me too
Mm.
sensitive.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah.
And I feel like a lot of this work, I do holistic therapy. You do conventional traditional therapy,
Mm-hmm.
right? Okay. Either one, moms need to realize that it's continual work that will get you this transformation from
Yes.
stepping away from invalidation of people. Like you just said, I really loved it where you said that, you were in your right, but so was your mom. Your mom was
Mm-hmm.
in her right from the knowledge and experience from where
Mm-hmm. Mhm,
she
from
was.
the she was doing her best with the tools that she had, with the
Right.
mental capacity, with the experiences, with whatever the case, and to be honest, as an adult, I learned a lot about my mother and my father's relationship and some of the things that I wasn't privy to as a child, and that is so important too, where some of those things can be traumatizing to children because I didn't have the mental capacity to deal with a lot of these things. I didn't know why we had to move thousands and thousands of miles away from my father, but it was the best thing that could have ever happened to me. But I hated her for years because I wanted my dad. But
Mm.
it was the best thing that she has ever done for me, ever. But I didn't know that. I didn't know that my father was
Mm,
struggling with drugs and that he was abusive and some of the things that he was doing. I didn't know that. So it's
mm,
so hindsight is 2020. I'm an adult. I understand that now. But as a child, I was depressed. I wanted my dad. And I felt like she was
yes,
the enemy.
she was, yes, that's what
Yeah.
happens,
Yeah.
right?
That's why they say it's
And
three sides to every story.
yes, right. And then with you, I see like that capacity that you came in a little more sensitive than what your mother, and I feel like you didn't understand everything, but you had some wisdom in you that you spoke your truth. And that's when
Hmm.
you said that you would get in trouble for speaking your
Yes.
truth at such a young age. So it's important for me to let the audience know, the moms know that your children, just because they're 5, 6, 7, they have wisdom.
Mm,
Listen to them,
yes.
because age doesn't mean anything other than you telling them, don't do this because that's dangerous.
Hmm.
Don't do that because that can harm you. But when it comes to nuggets of wisdom, listen to your children because they have it. My all three boys, I have a 10-year-old and I have a 20-year-old and a 24-year-old.
Oh my
My
goodness.
the ones that were in their 20s when they were younger, they would tell me some things that would be like, you know, I never talked like that when I was your age,
Hmm.
but I really like that insight.
Yes.
So be open to your kids' insights.
Yes. And sometimes they're just calling it how they see it, and you don't even see it in that
And
way
that's what
because
I
you're.
see in you. You were
Hmm.
doing that. You were,
Yeah.
so if your mom was open to that, she would have learned some because you were coming in with your authenticness,
Yes. I
right?
had a lot. Look, it wasn't like that for a while, and I think
I know.
there are studies that say like once you become a teenager, that's when like the protective side of you comes out, and you want to start voicing things, and people are just like, "What
Mhm.
is wrong with you?" Like, be quiet, sit down somewhere. We don't got time for this. You don't know what you're talking about. Like you over here triggering everybody, upsetting everybody. Be quiet.
Oh,
But you're right, because I have a 5 year old and a 3 year old, and sometimes the things that my daughter says to me, I'm just like, okay,
okay,
all right.
right?
Like, and I'm not kidding. Her first sentence, like she said words, but her first sentence to like ever in her life when she was talking to her dad, and I was sitting there when she said it, but she said, "Daddy, do you cry?" Mommy cries because I was crying a lot, and I was just like, "Oh God, you see me?
Oh,
Like you know I'm crying all the time. Like this is awful." Granted, I was pregnant at the time, so I was struggling, and she was too, but they see it. They know what's going on.
right. Oh my gosh. Okay, so from the sensitive one, the next
Yes.
one is
The perfect one. Last but not least, the perfect one. So the one that feels like they have to do everything absolutely perfectly. And if they don't, then it's not good enough. They
mhm,
failed, and I mean perfect, straight A's. They have to look perfect, whatever that may look like. They have to eat the
mhm,
perfect diet. They have to do everything perfectly. And there are parents out there, especially my clients of Asian descent, Caribbean descent, um,
mm,
African,
mhm,
those clients, I find that they're taught that they have to be perfect.
mhm,
And if they're not perfect, then they're failing. Where they had to get straight A's, they had to graduate with all of the honors and do all the stuff. They have to be a
mhm,
doctor. They have to be a lawyer. If they're not, then that's just not good
mm,
enough. And
I know.
that's a sad way of living because we're
Oh,
human. We're not
pressure.
perfect.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
much
I mean, and
pressure.
there are children out there who can make straight A's easily. They without even
Mhm,
blinking. There are other children out there who make A's and B's. There's nothing wrong with making A's and B's.
mhm.
I made A's and B's and C's and I graduated with my bachelor's and my master's. It was fine.
I
Like nobody asks me when they want a therapist, like, "Oh, what grades did you have in high school?"
were you a
Nobody
straight A?
cares as long as I graduated. So, and so I always feel so bad for people who are so hard on themselves and they feel like they have to be perfect. And there is no perfect
Right.
mother. I am not a perfect mother. I don't strive to
Hmm.
be a perfect mother. What I
Hmm.
strive to do is to be as in tune with my children as possible.
Yes.
And if I make a mistake, to own it and to
Hmm.
change if I
Hmm.
can. I mean, I can't
Beautiful.
change that. I might discipline them sometimes because they need discipline, so I'm not changing that. But if I do something that's like offensive or hurt their feelings or something like that, of course I'm going to apologize. I apologize to my kids all the time. There's nothing
Hmm.
wrong with that. So just this idea of being perfect, it's just not real.
Yes, yes, yes. That's another imaginary idea that we tend to hold on to as moms, to be the perfect mom. And like you said before, earlier in the conversation about being that super mom, right? We've all
Mhm.
have tried. And, I caught myself, after I had to have three kids to learn from the first two to
Mhm.
chill and relax with my third one.
Yeah.
Not many of us can get that, right? We might do the first two, and that's what we did.
Yes.
And it's like, in hindsight, we're looking back and saying, oh, okay, I could have done it differently now
Mhm.
that I know what I know,
Yeah.
right? So I just want to tell moms to have some grace and have some, chill and relaxed vibes for being and doing the mom role. Because
Yes.
it really is, actually day by day.
It is because I'll say it's hard for me to relax all the time. So I catch
Mm-hmm.
myself a lot where I'm just like, why am I literally freaking out because like for some reason a trigger for me is when they splash water in the tub. And of course, kids are going to splash
Mm.
water in the tub like
Yeah,
they
they
do
are.
it.
Yeah,
Is
exactly.
that you're
Exactly.
not going to not see water on your floor. And I'm just sitting there most of the time, I'm just like, why am I getting so upset? I'll just wipe it up. It's not even that
It's
hard. It's clear liquid.
Yeah.
It is fine. And I have to like tell myself these
You
things.
have to talk yourself through it.
I
Yeah,
really
I
do.
believe it.
Yeah.
My first two, I could not see a mess in the living room. Like, I did
Yeah.
not like toys in the living room. So
Mhm.
they grew up not really playing with toys because I
Mm.
had that thing. I had my third child, and I was like, make make all the mess you want. I'll just
Yes.
pick it up at night.
That's so funny because my husband took all of their toys that made the most mess and put it in their bedrooms under like he got these under the bed storage things
Yeah.
so that they would forget about him, and they forgot about them and they don't really play with them. I'm just like, they are kids, and if people come
Yeah.
to our house and they expect it to be immaculate, then they need to get out. These are not the type of people I want in my life, where you want my house to be immaculate with two small children.
Yes. And
Because do you go into people's houses and judge them if they have toys on the floor?
I'm gonna be real. I had a family member that came over one time, and she must have talked in front of her daughter. That her daughter one time came over to visit and told me that I have a messy house.
No.
And I said, ooh, she's been listening to a
Yeah.
mom conversation, and that's what mom feels, that I have a messy house. Well, I'll have you know that my son, I think, was like 18 months, and I was juggling a full time, then I went part time job. And it was just a lot for me.
Yeah.
And I honestly, at that time, didn't care. I don't care if I have a messy house. I
Mm.
really did it with the first two,
Yeah.
and I feel
Yeah.
I deprived them of their own ability to want to play. Well, guess what? My son, 10 years later, my house is nice and clean because he doesn't play, with those toys anymore.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
okay if you have those phases.
Absolutely. And I feel like I had to not I hate to use the word train my husband, but I had to really encourage him and motivate him to just be like, it is okay, because it's not like we had rodents and food
Yes,
everywhere. It's
yes,
literally just
yes,
toys, and the laundry was piling up and
yes,
that kind of stuff. It's not dirty. It's just we have,
yes,
especially in the newborn stage, like
yes,
I barely had time to feed myself or shower, let alone clean
yes.
a house.
Yes, I was just exhausted. And
Yeah.
this is from a second marriage, and he wouldn't wake up to help me when the baby wakes up at night.
Yeah.
And that was very, challenging for me. And so, you never know what a
Mhm.
mom is carrying inside.
Mm-mm.
And for
No.
someone, especially a family member, to come and, talk a little smack about your
Mhm.
house, who
Yeah.
cares? I'm giving you
Ugh.
permission to let it go
Let
and
it go.
know, yes, and
And those
know that,
people, that should tell you something about them and not about you.
mhm,
Honestly, because
absolutely, yeah,
think about it, like, and that's why after having 2 kids, like, when other people are having children, yes, I wanna give them stuff for their baby
yeah.
shower, like, the stuff the babies need, but I also wanna get you, like, a Domino's gift certificate so you can order some pizza, a bottle of
That's a
wine when you're ready to drink, like, I want write it down a little
you're like, because
coupon.
I know.
Yes, write down a little coupon of like, I will come over and help you clean your house if you need me. I will come over and hold this
Mm,
baby so you can go and cry somewhere by yourself for 2 hours. I will do that because
yeah, you
moms matter
see?
too. Like, no, oh, I wish somebody would tell me my house is a mess. What's wrong with you? And I will say, I do see moms who have like immaculate houses and who will
Mhm,
tell me, like, yeah, my house is clean, but I also don't spend a lot of time with my kids. Or they're like suffering in other ways because they're keeping this immaculate house, which I'm
mhm,
sorry, I would much rather spend time with my children and make sure that they're
mhm,
taken care of and having and
mhm,
building that relationship with them rather than like
mhm,
constantly cleaning all
mhm,
day. It's not the
mhm,
same as
mhm.
cleaning as you're an adult. You just simply put things away. Kids don't put stuff away.
Right, 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 right. And so I just want to say that because I allowed my third child to have that room to get dirty, whatever, he's the most creative out of
Oh,
all. You see what I'm saying?
I love
So
that.
yeah, because I cut that out from the other ones of, you know, and it's just have grace with yourself. They're only
Yes.
little for a certain amount of time.
Hmm.
Then they grow up and, okay, then they have a room and then their room could be messy, but
Yeah.
like the outside of the house is not messy. You see what I'm
Yes.
saying?
Yes.
And let people talk. Let people
Hmm.
talk. Let it go.
Yes. Hmm.
Right?
That's that ain't got nothing to do with
Yes.
you. I, I would never. I would never go into somebody else's house. It's like I judge my own house, but I'm never going into somebody else's house and like, ugh, this is all them toys. Like, what's going on? I don't even
What's
care.
going on here?
I don't care. So if you coming up in here judging me,
What the heck?
sorry. I'm
Yes,
doing the
so
best
that's
I
the
can
real.
over here.
Yes, and I mentioned that because that's the real of the real of people coming over and then you not
Mhm.
wanting to have people over.
Yeah.
But the whole point is for mom, relax, you do
Mhm.
you, what makes you happy, and sometimes you don't have the help, you let it pile up, and then you
Yes.
get to it when you can. You see what I'm saying? There
And
has
that's a
to
part
be
of setting boundaries too, of having those people who you know that would not judge you come to your house. So maybe you don't want
mhm.
the people who would judge you. Maybe
Yeah,
they're not, you
exactly.
don't want them to be privy to that vulnerable state that you're in. Because
Oh, yes.
my two best friends ended up, because it it took me a very long time to let them come over and see my daughter. And my best friend, shout out to Nellie, she said, we coming. So I'm coming on Saturday.
Oh.
You're just gonna have to prepare yourself and we're coming because this is ridiculous. I have not met my godchild yet. And like we're just gonna be there for you. And I cried for the first 2 hours and the house was a mess and they helped me clean it and they told me that they don't care. And then
Oh,
I
you
felt so
see?
much better afterwards. But I know that they don't
Right.
judge me.
Right,
Yeah.
right, right. Yep. That's being a mom.
Yeah.
Okay, so thank you for going over the 5 toxic family roles and their consequences. And I'm going to post the links where everyone can,
Mhm.
see your work and see what you do. I do want to mention you have a Facebook group about that I really love, and it ties in with the conversation that we had about mothers having difficult relationships with their daughters. Can you
Mhm.
tell us about your group?
Yeah, so it's a support group, and I'm just starting it in January. I'm really excited to have a couple of
Mm,
more slots available. But Mother Hunger was coined by a clinical therapist called Kelly McDaniels. She wrote a book
mm,
called Mother Hunger, and she was on Red Table Talk. That's where I discovered her. And I mean, when she speaks, it's like she's speaking to me. She sees me. She sees little
Mm.
Chenelle and everything that she's going through. But she kind of talks about she says that daughters need three things from their mother: nurturance, guidance, and protection. And if we don't have all three of those things,
Mm.
that we really struggle. And she kind of talks a lot about what that really means.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I have a support group where we go over some of the main points in the book, and we kind of work through it together, because I feel like with women with mother hunger, we feel really alone. We don't have a lot of
Mm.
people to talk to about it, because like I said, if, as long as we're not getting beat down or any type of sexual abuse or something like that, something crazy that makes people think that oh yeah, yeah, like that's trauma, that's awful, these other things of like, oh, your
Are
mom
not
didn't,
validated,
yeah, oh, your
right?
mom didn't understand you, like what does that even mean? Like, girl, you had a house, you had a, or my favorite thing that a lot of clients say is, people say, you had all this money, you had two parents in your house, like what's wrong with you, what do you have to complain about? you you're a doctor, your parents did very well,
Mm.
like go sit down somewhere, it's fine. Like, just because I'm a doctor, that means that everything else is fine, like what? So sometimes we can feel really alone. So I love the idea of creating this group so that we
Okay.
can talk about it together and just have a community of
Mm.
other women who understand where we're coming from, and then just talking about different ways where we can set boundaries. And when I say set boundaries with our mothers, and also setting boundaries for ourselves. So like the
Mm-hmm.
example I gave
Mm-hmm.
earlier where I
Mm-hmm.
said that, I'm not going to just pry my heart open at every chance that I get, because it's just leaving me so vulnerable. So I'm
Yes.
going to, make sure that I'm protecting my heart a little bit. I'm going to make
Yeah.
sure that I'm effectively communicating with the people around me. I think the most beautiful way to set boundaries with your mother probably is to just limit your time with her. So the
Mm.
holidays are coming up. So if you don't want to stay at her house, don't stay at her house. Stay at a hotel, stay at a friend's house, and come and visit
I
her.
love that.
Yeah, so you're still
Yes.
seeing her, but you're not in it, in your childhood home, because there's something
Oh,
about when you're in your
yes.
childhood home too. It just brings up a lot of it makes you feel like you're a 12-year-old again, and then you revert back to those 12-year-old behaviors, and it's just not fun. So just, finding ways
Mm.
to set boundaries to protect yourself.
I love that. Thank you for
Yeah,
sharing that as we
of
close the
course.
podcast. I am so happy that we were honored by your presence, by your wisdom, and I'm
Thank you.
so appreciative of the laughs that we had. And the laughs I just want to say about that is about, we can laugh because we've healed those aspects about ourselves, right?
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
that's what I want moms to see, that there is laughter after trauma, there is
Yes.
joy, there is success. And
Mhm.
with everything that you've been through, everything that I've gone through, here we are, helping moms realize that there is more to them than what they're being made to believe or feel,
Mm.
right?
Yes. Yes.
So I look forward in collaborating more with you and
Yes.
working together on other projects. I really do enjoy our energy together.
Yes, I
So
agree.
Chanel, thank you. And I'll be dropping all the links so you guys can find her. And until the next time, thank you. Thank you for taking the time to listen to Neutralize the Mama Trauma podcast. If you haven't already, please hit the like and subscribe button so you don't miss any new episodes. It would also mean the world to me if you're able to take a moment and rate and review my podcast on how it was helpful to you. Also, please connect with me on my social media platforms. Thank you so much, and I hope to see you in the next episode.